Hi there, I'm Dean Heskin, President and CEO of Swiss America Trading. And as I'm sure you already know, you are tuned in to our podcast entitled The Secret War on Cash, where we take a look at each week, a couple times a week, in fact, different things that are taking place in the financial markets, the economy. Sometimes it's maybe one thing, maybe a couple things. The good thing is there's, generally speaking, no shortage of things to talk about. And as much as we haven't seen a big shift or any big changes in our financial markets, any of them, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, real estate, gold, silver, we have seen a lot of activity and a lot of positioning, I'd say. So to talk about this today, I have my co-host, Chris Agelastos, here with us. Chris, good morning to you. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you for having me.
Well, as always, thanks for being here. I wouldn't be here without you. How about that? Or if it wasn't you, I'd have to have somebody else, but they wouldn't be near as good as you.
I appreciate that.
Well, you know, I mean it from the bottom of my heart. All right, well, let's get into it here. In fact, the podcast we did prior to this one was we talked specifically and somewhat extensively about the recent move Saudi Arabia made away from the petrodollar. And that was very significant because the petrodollar, which was started in 1974, 50 years later, now these oil producing nations and others are saying, no mas, no more. We are no longer going to subscribe to this notion of the petrodollar. And to explain what that is to listeners who may not be aware, in 1974, when we were having the oil crisis and the OPEC oil embargo was put into place, it stated that any oil transacting that took place around the world, if you were, let's say, Russia, you needed to convert your currency into dollars in order to transact. Take any country throughout the world, this was the dynamic that was created. The interesting thing is, in this first article, we now have Russia and Saudi Arabia that are doing this. They're stepping away from the petrodollar, as we just mentioned. What I find interesting in this article, because we just talked before about how they were no longer using petrodollars, but now what they're talking about is, in this case, Russia and Saudi Arabia, they're eyeing the Chinese yuan for their oil trades. Now, to say that China has been in the financial world, to some extent, a bit of a thorn in our side, in the United States side, when it comes to financial markets, economy, currencies, et cetera, I think many would suggest is somewhat of an understatement to say they're a thorn in the side, or being in Arizona here, a burr in our saddle. But when you look at this, the same strength that we've benefited from for all these years with our currency, with the US dollar, from the petrodollar's dominance, now that's just another thing that's shifting over to China.
Yep.
Am I reading too much into this, Chris, or is this really potentially even a more severe blow than we originally thought it would be to the US dollar?
Yeah, it's definitely a big deal. I mean, when you look at the fact that, Russia is already the world's largest energy exporter, and China is the second largest economy in the world. They're in a position here now to gain more power and influence by using the yuan for these transactions. Saudi Arabia is already in talks to use it with both Russia and China. And so obviously we're going to see, increased inflation, which we've talked about. That's going to, hurt people here when it comes to spending power. But I think a big thing that we have to consider is the added power and influence that this is going to give Russia and China. And I think, no one would be surprised at the fact that, Russia and China don't necessarily care too much about the U.S. And they certainly care more about themselves and taking over power. And so I think, people just have to pay attention here. The dollar is obviously in decline. We've been talking about it for a while. And I think sometimes people think it's just like a light switch on or off. The dollar's either doing well or it isn't. Well, we've been in this downward path for quite a while. and all the signs point to continuing down this path. So it's not something that you're just going to wake up tomorrow and the dollar is necessarily gone, but every day the dollar is going to have less and less power, and it's not going to go nearly as far at the grocery store or the gas pump or everywhere else when you're paying your bills, and that causes pain to the average citizen.
Oh, for sure. Well, we're talking about this in the context of the petrodollar.
Mm-hmm.
We've also, though, been covering almost for a year now on our podcast the emergence of BRICS and Russia being involved in that, where at one point several months ago, Putin directly said that one of his main goals, especially with this alliance of BRICS, was the abolishment of the US dollar, to get rid of the US dollar.
Yeah.
So this is just yet another move that, is by design, I believe, by Putin, something to, again, take another layer, if you will, away from the US dollar. And so he's got BRICS moving in that direction, but he's also got what he's doing now with the petrodollar that's moving in that same direction. So we can end on a high note today. Let's take a look at the next article here. Let's give some good news. This article here talking about UBS, how gold dips are to be bought, not sold. And, interestingly enough, markets, nobody knows for sure what's going to go up, what's going to go down. We can look at data, we can look at information, we can listen to people and try to make the best of the information in front of us in terms of what to do. But even that, ultimately speaking, we're at the mercy of whatever market out there. This article I found to be very refreshing, not just because we deal in gold, we deal in silver, it's in our world, but it all makes sense. I mean, it is something that, especially when you look at gold prices, many experts, as we've covered, have talked about gold prices reaching as much as $3,000 an ounce by the end of this year. In some cases, even more, and in some cases, significantly more, which makes sense due to central bank buying, due to BRICS, due to institutional buying, investor buying. So gold dips to be bought, not sold. I'm sold on that, Chris. What say you?
Yeah, I agree. And we talk to people every day, obviously clients and prospects that are looking to get into the market. And some people have expressed concern. Well, we're near highs. Is it really a good time to buy? Because we've always heard buy low and sell high. So having a third party come in and say something like, buying around $2,300 is still a value and a good dip and a time to pick up some more, definitely carries some weight. And, gold is one of those unique things. It's not like a typical stock, that can be very volatile. If you're buying gold and you're holding it long term, you're going to do well. I mean, looking back now, there's been no time in the past that gold hasn't meet and beat its previous high. So as long as you're not trying to quickly trade the market and buy today and make money in 2 months and sell, could that happen? Sure. But if you're buying to hold for long-term security to protect your savings, picking it up at any time, especially when there's a little dip, is a good opportunity. And, they specifically point out in here, we're seeing higher unemployment. There's been a decline in new job offerings. They believe the Fed is going to have to do some rate cuts this year, which again leads to higher inflation, which pushes precious metal prices. You mentioned, central bank buying earlier. Obviously, there's no shortage of geopolitical tensions in the world right now, and we're going into an election year. So, I think all signs point to the fact that gold is a valuable hedge for protection. And, if you have money on the sidelines and can pick some up, you really should.
For sure. Well, and I know some of you tuning in, or based on conversations and comments we've received from people over the course of time we've been doing this, and people we talk to every day, some might be asking, well, gold, what about silver? The good thing is you could really interchange the two. The markets do tend to trend the same direction. So if you have a greater partiality towards silver. Silver's good too. Getting into metals, being diversified, given the condition of the global economy and some of the things that are taking place out there, is a really, really good thing. And to find out more about how you can do that, how you can get yourself better or more diversified into metals, contact us, please. Call us at 1-800-289-2646. Speak to one of our representatives. They'll be happy to answer questions you have, get you out information at no charge, get you maybe a little bit of understanding or knowledge under your belt that you don't already have, so that what you're doing or not doing is not an uneducated decision. You're taking whatever action or not inaction that you may be taking based on what you know, not on what you don't know. So contact our office, or you visit us online at www.swissamerica.com. Thanks again, Chris. This has been another good podcast, I believe. We're getting right into the meat of some very serious issues here that are taking place around us very quickly, in fact. So if you haven't subscribed to our podcast, please do so. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.